Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, a show at the intersection of technology and strategy. On this show, we interview industry leaders and experts to better understand how they think about strategy during this time of exponential progress.
Hey guys, welcome to the Point of No Return podcast. Today's show features a special interview with Mark Floisand, CMO at Coveo. I was really happy that Mark took some time while he was in town from SF to sit down and chat. A bit on his background. He has had an impressive career. He has over 20 years of marketing, sales, and management experience in tech. He's worked in blue chips. He's worked at startup companies across multiple continents and some really cool brands that you're probably familiar with: Apple, Adobe, SAP, Total Defense, Untangle and WeVideo. And right before Coveo, he was at Sitecore, where he was leading product marketing. So on the show, we went really deep in terms of marketing, in terms of how he thinks about strategy. We spoke about how the balance of power has shifted to the consumer. We spoke about the importance of relevance for businesses today and what that means for Coveo, the challenges of getting the Coveo brand recognized and getting into the consideration set. We also spoke about how they use machine learning in their products, some really interesting applications. And then finally, the main challenges for organizations today about how companies need to move faster, which was music to my ears. Mark is a world-class leader. I had been really looking forward to that conversation, and he did not disappoint. I hope you enjoy the show. Mark, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'm happy that you're in town from SF, and we had a chance to catch up. I guess maybe as a first question to kick things off is, how did you get started in the tech industry?
Wow, interesting question. So many decades ago, showing my age here, I actually got a part-time job packing boxes in a warehouse in the UK for Apple. And it was a kind of a temp job, and about day 4, they needed some help on the sales desk, and kind of went down the warehouse and saw if there was anyone keen who could kind of recount our part codes. And I put my hand up, and that was it. So yeah, I kind of landed by accident in tech, and my career really stayed in the tech sector thereafter, mostly software. So I've worked for companies like BusinessObjects, who were acquired by SAP, Adobe, Sitecore, and obviously most recently Coveeo. And along the way, a couple of startups mixed in between as well.
And along the way, what do you think you've developed as your core skill set? Obviously, you're CMO of Coveo, so you oversee a broad range of the business. Do you think you consider yourself more of a sales guy or more of a marketing guy, or is it really is it a mix of both?
I think these days it's important to have a blend of pretty much all those skills. So I'm fortunate in my career my early career was very much sales centric, and both direct sales, indirect sales, channel sales. So that gave me a very rounded appreciation of what it feels like to carry a bag, be on commission, sign a contract. You value leads, you value relationships. But my passion is in marketing. And so I was able to, move from a sales career into a marketing career and bring that experience with me. And I think that's been really helpful because particularly in, let's call it business to business communications, the degree of complexity of how many different people you have to communicate to, their different buying needs, the types of information they're going to require, at least having an appreciation of what the sales guys are up against when they go through that process, I think has stood me in really good stead.
So having hands-on operational experience helps you guide and coach the team in essence, right? Yeah. How do you feel that, because as you mentioned, you've had quite a bit of experience in the sector. So I imagine, from the early days of, B2B selling with, guys in ties going versus today, which is a much more multifaceted, much more online approach. What do you feel has been the biggest change in terms of being able to communicate and work with new customers?
Right. So there's been a fundamental shift, which, we're all living in the middle of, in the balance of power for any buyer, whether that's, us as consumers or, putting our business purchasing hat on. The balance of power has shifted in the favor of the individual. And that's a fundamental seismic shift. That means that, if you roll the clock back, say 15 years, absolutely as whether you were working for an institution or an organization or a government department or a business, you actually put a high degree of stock in the information you got from vendors. And yeah, the guys in ties would fly in and, wow you with presentations and like foils and all those sort of things back in the day. And a lot of the information flowed from the vendor to the buyer. And of course, here we sit in a fundamentally different world where everything you need is already online. And so as an informed buyer, one is able to do all of the homework needed before calling a vendor. So you have people like CEB, who are now part of Gartner, who have measured this thing for a while, and I think their latest numbers are that 67% of the journey a buyer goes through is conducted before they get hold of any vendor on a short list. Why? Because all of that information is available. They're able to, research any problems that they may have. They're likely to discover that there are solutions. They can do homework about which vendors are providing those solutions. They can meet amongst themselves internally. They can draw up a short list. They can eliminate vendors from that process who don't even know that they were actually considered and then ruled out. So that fundamental shift in terms of empowered buyers being able to self-service and really make their own decisions as to whom they want to engage with and who they don't means that B2B marketing has fundamentally changed. It's fundamentally changed because it's not about equipping your best sales guys with the best deck and having them go wow a buyer into submission. It's about providing educational information in places that people may discover it, and trying to anticipate where they're likely to go and find information about topics that you believe you are relevant to, and putting it in front of them in ways that they choose to digest it. And so, the buyer's journey is now about the individual buyer finding out stuff they want of their own, on their own timeline, on their own terms. And marketing's role really is to sort of sow those seeds and set out your stall so that should they be enticed, that you're ready to pick up the ball and move them to the sales process.
Do you feel that the role of the, let's say, classic account executive, will that role ever disappear? Its importance obviously, or maybe not its importance, but its nature has changed fundamentally in the chain. How do you see that role changing, and do you ever see it disappearing?
I guess, do I ever see it disappearing? No. It's absolutely changing. Even within our own organization, we're moving much more to let's call it a named account, selling model, where instead of, looking at every lead as a potential opportunity to do a transaction and move on to the next, which I think was perhaps the role of, sales execs in the past, very transaction centric, deal by deal by deal. We're in a world now where larger organizations absolutely value the opinion of a seasoned account executive who understands their business, understands the market that they're in, and can actually bring some advice and guidance to the table. You hear this term trusted advisor, whatever you want to use. I think if you're not relevant to an organization, you shouldn't be there. And what does relevance mean? Well, for those senior execs dealing with, rapid competition, or competition that's changing fast, a market that's moving really quickly, how can you bring guidance and information to them that may or may not culminate in them actually purchasing your stuff? You have to look beyond those transactions. So I think the account exec role has become much more one of, let me deeply understand the organization that I'm working with. That this isn't about a single transaction. It is about an ongoing relationship of identifying where to find additional value for my client. And that requires a different mindset. It requires people that have perhaps more of a breadth, are able to bring perhaps a depth of experience about that industry itself, or a depth of experience about the particular problem area that they're encountering, or functional area, and really bring, value that is beyond just, I've got this product to sell.
So I imagine, and maybe I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I imagine the main challenge for a CMO today is the orchestration of all these different pieces, because it used to be a little bit more simple in the good old days, let's say. But versus today, where marketing itself is no longer just a cost center, it's its own P&L. In essence, it's generating leads, it's able to drive business. to those account executives that are now becoming, as you said, have a much more consultative capacity than a pure transactional one. Is that the main challenge of a CMO today, and in particular in a B2B environment? Is it that orchestration of all these different parts together?
I like the term orchestration because, it implies sort of, making sure everything is in harmony. And there is a large part of that. To me, the key thing in terms of being successful from a marketing point of view is to know that you're partnering with the rest of your organization in concert, if you like. So, gone are the days where, marketing was on the hook for, quotes, filling the top of the funnel, getting marketing qualified leads and throwing them over the fence to, a sales team that would hopefully accept them, or reject them based on, the quality. And instead what we see is much more of a need to be really joined at the hip all the way through that sales funnel. So, for example, if you think of, and again, there are buzzwords flying around like account-based marketing and so on. Really, I think what they all point to is how does one focus much more on relevant communications to particular target organizations rather than just, providing generic information to the market and hoping some of it lands. That's got to be done in concert with a sales team. So how do we as, marketing and sales execs collaborate on things like where are the next set of opportunity or accounts coming from? What can we sense in the market that would give us clues to point to certain companies as being very viable account targets that we agree to partner on in terms of going into? That marketing can provide some air cover around that account, very tailored on it, that supports the salesperson who's trying to frankly open up that account for the first time. In other words, we have shared responsibility throughout the funnel. It's not I work to this point and drop the ball and you work from that point onwards. And I think that's a fundamental shift. So how does one partner with the rest of the business, rather than operating in isolation, and be responsible for performance throughout that funnel? For example, in my own team, we pay close attention, not just to the kind of leading indicators of, how many responses are we generating? Are we penetrating the right accounts? Are we raising awareness? But have we got, sales pipeline coverage? Are we building it? Do we have a good sense of whether next quarter's forecast is, kind of covered from a pipeline management point of view? I want my marketing team to be sensitized to the entire sales funnel and marketing funnel, not just some metrics at the top of it.
I'm going to want to come back to these points because they're super interesting, particularly in terms of partnering with the rest of the organization. But I want to talk a little bit about Coveo,
sure.
and the mission that you guys are on. Maybe as first high-level question is, what does relevance at scale mean for you and your team specifically, given Coveo's mission?
Yeah. So, Coveo's mission is really to, frankly, make business personal, to enable our enterprise customers to have much more engaging personal relationships and interactions with the people that they engage with, whether those are their employees, whether those are their partners or their customers. And what does that mean? Well, if we think of what we just covered in terms of buyer journeys and, the fundamental change in the balance of power, it means that individuals need to feel like any enterprise that's dealing with them respects them as individuals, is tailoring information to them, and providing really what they need next every step of the way with them. And we help with that process by providing, if you like, a layer of relevance throughout the organization that kind of injects the most relevant content into each interaction that an employee or a partner or a customer might have with one of our clients. And so to really, live and breathe that, we have to do the same thing. We have to ensure that when people engage with us, that they feel that these are personal relationships, that they're meaningful, that the information we're providing is relevant at that point in time and is relevant to them as individuals. That requires fundamentally changing how one goes about marketing. The whole idea of saying, let's buy in a list and spam a bunch of people with a generic email with a little bit of tailoring to put their front name in the subject line. That is just tacky and doesn't work anymore. Why? Because there isn't the sense of how that aligns to the journey that each of those individuals is going on. So you have to be much more adept at tailoring and being more personal in terms of what you do.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a very relevant solution for today, as you mentioned, right? The balance of power shifted and is basically shifted forever, right? It's not going back. What is the main challenge you have in convincing businesses to work with you? Is it in the sense that, are you too early in the sense people don't get it, or is it you're in the middle phase where you're offering a solution, but there's also competitors that have similar products or competing products? Where do you feel the biggest challenge you have in terms of customer education lies today?
Yeah, perhaps before I answer, let me step back one and just put in context where we are relative to where I see the market. Because I think that if you think of what Coveo offers, I think of it as a three-legged stool. On the one hand, one of those legs is about kind of connecting to organizations' content and unifying that into a single searchable index. How do we do that? We connect to all sorts of things like Google Drive and SharePoint folders and SAP accounting systems and whatever else. Wherever content lives in an organization, how do you unify that into one place so that there's an asset that can be put to work with all that content stack ranked by its relevance? That's one leg. The second leg of the stool is using all of the information that an organization has about the interactions that it's had with its customers, partners, employees. And those interactions can take the place of, or the form of things like web traffic analysis, search journeys, interactions on intranets, on consumer or community portals, whatever they happen to be. The sum total of those kind of digital footprints of all of those people provide very rich clues as to what their intent is, what they found useful, what they didn't, and can provide an incredible amount of information to help the next sort of cohort of people coming through, the next individuals coming through, to be recommended stuff that other people found relevant. But to do that at scale requires a machine learning approach that can take all of that information about that content and all of that information about those interactions and look for patterns constantly. And from that, recommend the most relevant information for each individual based on what it is they're doing at the time, the context of their task. And so the point about that is that in order for us to win in large enterprises, we see that typically we come in to solve a particular pain point at a departmental level, by and large. So most of our customers, if not all of our customers, started with some particular problem they were trying to solve at a departmental level and had a known set of content that they were trying to make more available to a known set of individuals and needed some help. So whether that was about improving the ability for customers to self-service through a customer portal, whether it was through improving the visibility of extra information on a website, or providing employees with a more comprehensive set of information through an intranet or an employee portal, respectively, the head of customer service or the head of marketing or the head of internal communications was the kind of line of business driver pulling us into those accounts. That's fine. Where we want to go and where we see organizations starting to have conversations is around, okay, we need to take a more joined up view of the world than solving these things on a departmental by departmental basis. And that takes two forms. There's almost a top-down view that comes from imagine an umbrella over the top of all of those divisional silos that is the C-suite, the CEO, the board, the executive team saying, grief, we need a digital transformation strategy. We have to compete. Everyone's read all the press. A third of the companies in the S&P won't be there in 10 years' time unless they evolve, as is the pattern over the last 10 years. And how do organizations rethink themselves to be more digitally engaging? So that kind of top-down strategy helps overlay what may have already taken place within individual accounts. Underneath all that, we are spending more and more time talking with CIOs, IT architects, the folks who are responsible for building out the infrastructure of those self-same enterprises to be more agile, more nimble, more supportive of the business units that they're there to serve. And so that backdrop is really where you find us, which is we've done a lot of work selling into organizations at departmental levels. And as we engage more and more with our top customers, they're moving us into other places and then saying, do you know what? You guys actually have a platform that enables us to transform more rapidly in other parts of our business. And we then see other departments kind of come on board very quickly. So that's an exciting phase to be in because we're not a McKinsey's, we're not an Accenture. It's not as though you've got someone like Dell or Salesforce or Adobe immediately thinking of Coveo as the company to turn to for strategic advice about digital transformation. But the reality is that every one of those organizations is using us in several different places and has started to stitch us together as this relevance fabric underneath everything they do.
Yeah, you're almost like a layer below, like at an operating system level to ensure that it works. So if I understand correctly, for Coveo, like the ultimate use case for Coveo is being able to take data from different departments, apply ML techniques to them, and be able to surface relevant content products to customers. I imagine there's more specific use cases than this, but this is kind of the brand promise that you have for your customers. So and then I'll go back to the original question. What is then your main headwinds today? Like your main challenges? Is it in essence of rapid growth? We need to just be able, like, it just makes intuitive sense. I think it's the back. It makes intuitive sense what you're saying. So it's like, why shouldn't everyone be using it? Right? So is the challenge growth, or is the challenge scaling your sales organization? Just want to understand your biggest priorities. Right?
Yeah, I think the challenge, frankly, is brand. So, we're 300 people, which is great, but we're not 300,000 people. Okay, and so if you think of that digital transformation initiative that, a board member may be imposing on a management team to say, we think you should embark on a digital transformation, project for the next 2 years. Who's that CEO going to turn to? Today, they're probably, from a brand point of view, going to default to some of the large strategy shops because that's who you go to for, major strategic initiatives, right? Whereas we're tending to be pulled in more at a departmental level because we solve particular pain points for those folks. So not that it's a credibility gap, it's just there's a lack of awareness that someone like a Coveo could potentially help large organizations with this. And that takes us right back to the point about what's the role of an account exec these days. The role of an account exec at Coveo is to help organizations join those dots. We're a humble company. We don't profess to be able to go and knock on the door of a Fortune 1000 firm cold and say, we help you change top to bottom without some sort of evidence behind us. And so our account execs are typically the ones that are able to help our existing customers who have brought us in for, solving problem one or problem two, to now see the bigger picture of where else we can help them, because invariably they do have some sort of digital journey they're going through. So whether you call that land and expand in terms of a strategic approach, it's not as though we're trying to walk through a front door and turn a company upside down from scratch. It's much more about how do we prove ourselves in an organization and enable them to see the benefits of advocating to their peers. Why would they do this, though? Fundamentally, it's because every one of these companies recognizes in a heartbeat that they operate in some degree of silos. The marketing team knows it's managing a website. The sales team knows it's managing a channel portal or an e-commerce store. The support team knows they're managing the customer self-service portal. And they know that those things aren't joined up. They also understand intuitively that it's the same people that are trying to engage with those different systems and those different sort of interfaces to the customer, and that they get these sort of fragmented, broken experiences. And so when we're able to articulate the fact that all of the interactions that an individual has had on any one of those places can help improve the relevance of what they do in the other ones, as long as you integrate them, as long as you unify those interactions in one place, you can put it to work for the whole company. The same with the content. The fact that you're taking content from all these different places and making them available to each of those different departments in turn, people get. But that's the role of our account execs, to paint that vision and help them understand that transformation is a process. Yeah. And they're on that journey.
Yeah. And it won't be owned by any one single individual or organization. You'll have multiple users using your platform in different ways, I imagine. And I know you work with a lot of partners, but you mentioned before, like, have you ever spoken with these strategy shops to build partnerships and like say, well, like, because you're very complementary to what you do, right? They sell human hours and you guys are selling the software, right? I'm just curious as to like, is that a potential go-to-market?
It is, and we do. So our partner program includes several of the larger organizations. So we've got relationships with folks like Avanade, which is part of the Accenture group, Deloitte Digital, which is obviously part of Deloitte's, and we continue to look at are having conversations with more of the big six as well. We tend to get traction, or have had traction historically, with maybe one rung below that, more boutique organizations that perhaps have a smaller set of clients that they are kind of intimately knowledgeable of and have won them through being able to, put innovative ideas on the table. And we've got good engagement with, many partners at that level, that have perhaps brought us in because they were focused on maybe a particular application the customers use. For example, somebody deciding to migrate to Salesforce for a CRM initiative. A partner such as someone like an Aperio, who is deeply embedded in the Salesforce ecosystem, would bring us in to help him, help that transition, help that improve, and from that expand. So we do have a broad network of partners, and a growing relationship with some of the larger ones as well. Yeah. And your point's exactly well taken, which is if we can help those partners not have to reinvent the wheel, but be more effective, more proficient in rolling out their own answers by using Coveo in a way that's repeatable, a way that is predictable for them, they are able to obviously manage their costs. They're not going to be surprised in any engagement. And when clients are asking them for things like fixed fee engagements rather than, time and materials, one of the ways that they can respond to those is by knowing that they've got a predictable cost from some of the vendors they work with. And we fit very well into that for them from their economics. Yeah.
And to switch gears a little bit, talk about in your current role as CMO, how do you set about to create strategy for the year over, let's say, a longer time span? What does that process look like for you?
Yeah. We go through a formal annual process and an informal quarterly process and a super informal monthly process, which, if that sounds chaotic, it's more that to try and plan for a year is necessary. One needs to do budgets and, we all have shareholders. So, that's an essential part of planning out the business. And that operational plan is derived from having a strategic view of where we're going to be in 3 years, in a year, and operationally what we need to do in the year ahead. But we revisit that quarterly because the market moves fast. We're in what I would call a scale-up mode. We're beyond startup, but we're not a massive organization. As I said, we're 300 people growing fast, about 55% year on year. But the point is that we're growing in a market that is moving very, very quickly. There are a lot of new entrants coming into the area of, quotes, AI and machine learning. What does that mean? What do they do? I would almost draw a parallel in the kind of AI and machine learning market right now with what the, quotes, cloud market looked like, quotes, unquotes, 10 years ago, which is every organization said, oh, we need some of this cloud stuff. Don't know what it is, but we want some. What is it? Like, I've got to have it. Without really having a sense of the fact that there was more to it than that, there was just this sense of, hang on, there's computing power on tap here that looks more nimble, and I think I should be putting it to work, but I don't know how. Same kind of parallel, there's all these people that are doing things around AI and machine learning, and that smells like goodness, but I don't know how. We're pretty focused on our usage of AI and machine learning, particularly around the area of finding the most relevant information for people in the course of, what they do, and ensuring that we stay well invested in, finding relevant information for people is really where we strategically keep coming back to. So where do we put our R&D dollars? Where do we put our hiring attention? What do we do in terms of positioning and messaging relative to new entrants into the market? We keep coming back to how do we ensure we're helping organizations be relevant to the people they interact with.
So you answered, I think, a few of my subsequent questions in terms of stuff that you're looking at. Are there, if you look at the industry right now, what are other areas? You mentioned machine learning, obviously. What are other areas that are a keen interest to you that you think will have an impact on your business in the short term?
I think that one of the things we're seeing is a lot more services being available in this networked environment that we live in through API or application programming interfaces that enable organizations like us to actually sharpen our focus. And what I mean by that is, again, if you think of how many places you could use machine learning and AI, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Strategy is what you don't do. And I think that what we're finding really helpful in the market right now is there are many things we could do, but we don't because we don't need to. I'll give you a specific example. So, a lot of the science that we're focused on is ensuring that we can make content available and discoverable for our customers in ways that are relevant to, the matter at hand for their employees, partners, or customers. And that requires being able to index that information and carry as much information into that index to ensure that, if this piece of content could be relevant in certain circumstances, that it's discoverable. Well, that's all very well and good with things like documents where you're able to, analyze the text and, understand the context of what's in those documents. But when you start thinking of things like photos and video, or maybe prior documents that are in print, that, maybe never saw the light of day, newspaper cuttings from the 1900s, none of this stuff exists necessarily in an easily consumable, discoverable format. Should Coveo be the company that therefore goes and builds out and invests in, document, image recognition, video recognition, OCR discovery? Short answer is no, because those services are now all available on demand, and we can integrate into those services to supplement the index that we host for our customers in a way that means that we can focus on making that stuff discoverable rather than worrying about do we need to invest in, for example, deep learning image recognition because it's important for people to understand more about photos. No, we can connect to a service from someone like an Amazon Recognition or a Salesforce Einstein or a Google Cloud, all of whom have got image recognition services that are open to us through APIs. So that's an interesting one. And I think the other thing that is exciting for us is that the more you're able to look at what you offer and kind of layer out your technology stack, the more you are able to engage with other people. And what I mean by that is if you look at, for example, in the area of indexing content, search classically, and I mentioned that's one of the three legs of my platform, the three-legged stool. There are many vendors out there that do search, quotes unquote. And there are now open source projects that have established themselves and got really strong footprints. For example, the Elasticsearch project has had hundreds of millions of downloads, has got literally hundreds of thousands of developers out there who have built search indices or indexes in all sorts of different places. Well, that's kind of interesting because it means a company has already gone some way down the route to putting information in one place that can be discoverable. We, Coveo, can use that. We don't have to have our own index at the heart of what we do. We're able to use those Elasticsearch-based indices in, wherever they happen to live and add more relevance, analytics, or machine learning capability on top. This is interesting because it means we can bring more value to companies who've already made a significant investment in aggregating content into one place. No need to redo it. We just add value on top of that as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Mark, and because I feel like you own the voice of the customer in the business, and to your points before is that there's a healthy tension, I imagine, between product vision and then what customers are asking, and you have to help bridge that gap between what customers are asking versus where the product roadmap should be going, right? And things like, well, why build it when we can simply partner with people that do this better, right? So there's this very interesting dichotomy between what do we build versus who do we partner with. And that has, I imagine, a huge incidence on how you go to market in your product. In the industry right now, what do you think is happening that doesn't get enough attention or that not enough people are talking about?
Interesting question. I would say that there's not yet a there's not yet a clear, consistent acceptance, particularly in larger firms, that they need to evolve faster. And I question why that is, because, you look in any sector, any industry, any market, any geography, and you will see that every business is being, quotes, disrupted, unquote. And, I don't like the word because it's thrown around a lot. Agreed. But it is thrown, right? And I'm not going to even point to all the brands that say they're the disruptor of this or the disruptor of that. But the reality of it is that digital capabilities, the speed with which people can put together new and innovative solutions, harnessing the power of scalable computing on tap from folks like Amazon and Google and Microsoft Azure and so on, means that you can reinvent an approach to something that may have been done traditionally for decades and be in market with a competitive offering fast with very few barriers to entry. And I'm surprised at how many larger established organizations are still complacent and still believe that their industry or their position in that industry is somehow sacrosanct and somehow immune to these market forces. Every industry is being changed because of the acceleration and access to API services, rapid ability to prototype and test out new services, the ability to apply incredible power to high volumes of data and yield new and interesting results. And a new workforce that frankly is adept at, using these tools in innovative ways. You have to embrace that change and expect your business to be threatened by it. Otherwise, you will not be there.
I can't think of a better place to kind of end our conversation, Mark. Maybe a final question is, where can people find out more about yourself or Coveo?
Sure. Obviously our website, coveo.com, Coveo.com, or keep current with us at our blog. We recently won a top 100 corporate blog award, so blog.coveo.com. Otherwise, you can follow us on Twitter, or follow me at Floisand, Floisand.
Thank you for your time, Mark. And I really liked your last comment. Music to my ears, kind of what we've been preaching on our end. So very much appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Thank you for listening to the Point of No Return podcast. Never miss an episode by clicking on the subscribe button on iTunes or Google Play.